Hey guys, how's it going? Good to see everyone. Can everyone hear me? If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Can you guys hear me? Awesome. Well, I gotta say, I'm really excited about today's show, and I think you guys are gonna be really excited as well. It is really cool. It's all about these guys, the super gigantic dinosaurs, and we're gonna talk about those in just a second. Before we go, and as always, I wanna thank all of you for tuning in for our classes, and we hope you guys are enjoying them. I think we are, because we're getting more and more of you kids from all across the country, kids and parents, so thanks parents for watching as well, and I'm really excited. I especially want to say thank you to everyone that has made donations to our museum, the museum at Dinosaur Junction, our new museum here in Walcott, Colorado, right in the Vail Valley in Eagle County. And it is going to be bigger and better than ever with the money you guys are donating and the support. So if you want to make a donation, you can get on fossilposse.com. And it's all right there. There's a little button you can donate right there. So thank you to everyone that's doing that. I'm Billy Dorn, Billy the paleontologist, if we haven't met, if we're just meeting. Nice to meet you. For those of you guys out there that know me already and I know you, welcome back. I run Fossil Posse Adventures and Kids Camp. We do a dinosaur camp in the summertime. Again, it's all on fossilposse.com. And if you guys want to contact me to ask me any questions or give me ideas for classes, you can email me through fossilposse.com as well. Also want to mention, remember, coming up this June, we got the new TV show, Fossil Quest, where I take you guys out to hunt fossils with me, dinosaurs, sharks, crocodiles, all kinds of cool stuff. So stay tuned for that. That'll be around June 1st that we start airing that. Okay, you can tell I'm kind of excited. And the reason I'm excited is because today's class is going to be really neat. We are going to be talking about the dinosaurs that give the whole idea of dinosaurs their title. We're talking about the biggest dinosaurs that ever lived. In fact, I need to make a change right now. You guys always see me with my dinosaur coffee mug, right? And this is a pretty good sized mug. Because we're talking about such big dinosaurs today, I need to switch to an even bigger mug. So I'm going to pour my coffee in this gigantic mug because these dinosaurs were gigantic. And to give you an idea, if I turn this mug around, there's 25 dinosaurs right here. From littler ones to Ankylosaurus to Stegosaurus, 25 dinosaurs to thousands of pounds each. If you add up all of those 25 dinosaurs, they equal one long neck, to give you an idea how big they are. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then for the second part of the show today, we're going to take your guys' questions. So hold your questions till we're ready. For now, I just want you to listen because you're going to be amazed. You're going to see some really cool stuff that's going to make your mind go explode, right? All right, let's take a look at these giant dinosaurs called sauropods. Sauropods are the family name that includes all the big long-necked dinosaurs you guys know, right? Including this guy. So I'm going to use this guy as an overview. This is Brachiosaurus. Brachiosaurus is one of the most well-known long necks, especially here in Colorado. And sauropods are known because of the way they look. You immediately recognize a sauropod, whether it's Brachiosaurus or Apatosaurus. And one of the things you notice right off the bat, they had little teeny heads, they had super long necks, which led to gigantic bodies, kind of like a giant elephant body. And then they had long, strong tails to help them live their life, basically. And one of the things that makes the giant sauropods so unique is the way their legs were. And if I hold this toy straight on, you see how his legs are right underneath his body? You can take a line and just go straight down from his shoulder, straight down his leg to the ground, as opposed to like an alligator or crocodile or a lizard where their legs are out to the side. They walk kind of like this. These guys walked more like elephants. They had these gigantic, strong telephone pole-like legs to support their huge weight, and they got gigantic. They got so big that it's hard to measure some of them. And I can tell you, to be that big, you got to eat a lot of food, right? A lot of the giant sauropod or long-necked dinosaurs ate as much as 1,000 pounds of food in one day. What? To give you an idea, that's like 4,000 hamburgers every day, eating 4,000 hamburgers just to stay healthy, just to stay moving around. You had to eat a lot. It's kind of like putting a lot of gasoline in a giant truck. And in fact, some of these dinosaurs, speaking of trucks, got so big They were bigger than 4 of the big giant semi-tractor trailer trucks you see on the highways all the time. Imagine taking 4 of those and smushing them together. They were immense animals. And a lot of people say, well, what were they like when they were babies? That's a great question, because that's another really cool fact about sauropods. When they were first born, believe it or not, they weren't a whole lot bigger than this toy when they were first born. And you know what? They had to grow to be over 10,000 times their baby size when they reached adulthood. Imagine being 10,000 times bigger than when you were a baby. You'd be so big, you wouldn't even fit inside your house. You wouldn't fit inside a giant building if you're 10,000 times bigger than when you were a baby. But these guys did it. They got so big and so heavy that they were over 10,000 pounds bigger, 10,000 times bigger than when they were babies. And you're like, well, where'd they come from? How does a dinosaur lay an egg that's that big? Well, the answer is they didn't lay gigantic eggs. To give you an idea, I have some eggs here to show you how big a sauropod egg probably was. So if I show you this, you guys recognize that. You probably eat them every morning for breakfast. You probably already had them this morning. It's a chicken egg, right? Chickens are dinosaurs technically, so that's kind of a tiny dinosaur egg. That's a chicken egg. If I hold this one up, you guys know what that one is? I can see, yep, some of you guys got it. This is an ostrich's egg. An ostrich is the largest bird on planet Earth right now. So a chicken egg, an ostrich egg. If I show you how big, I got to put the ostrich egg down for a second. Here's about how big a giant sauropod's egg was. Whoa, look at the size of that. There's the chicken egg, and there's the giant sauropod egg. And they got pretty gigantic. And one of the reasons they didn't get really super gigantic is a really good explanation. Inside this is all the gooey yolk and stuff you see inside a chicken egg, right? And it's the shell that keeps it all together. Well, the reason that dinosaur eggs weren't gigantic like you see in cartoons is if they were gigantic, the shell would have to be super thick to keep it together. Otherwise, it would just break because it was under its own weight. It was too heavy. So in order to make the shell to where it could stay one piece, it only could get so big. Otherwise, it got too thick and the babies wouldn't be able to break out. So that's about how big the biggest eggs that ever were laid from even the biggest dinosaurs were. That's one right there. That's pretty cool. And no, this isn't a real egg. This is a model of how big they were. I know a lot of you goes, is that a real dinosaur egg? But also to give you an idea how big some of these guys got, I got some bones here I want to show you. One of them in particular is a model of the biggest dinosaur leg bone ever found, right? Do you guys know what your femur bone is? Your femur is the bone between your knee and your hip, right? Right above your knee, between your knee and your hip. In this Brachiosaurus, it's this bone right back here between his back knee and his hip bone. That's a femur right there. Brachiosaurus's femur was a little bit taller than I am. But I'm going to show you a model of the biggest femur ever found. Are you guys ready? Hold on one second. Oh my gosh. I don't know if I can get this whole thing in the picture. Look how big this femur is. I can't even get the whole thing in. If I try and stand it up, it pretty much scrapes the ceiling. This is the femur to one of the biggest dinosaurs that ever lived, Argentinosaurus. And he was found in the country, just like his name, of Argentina. And to date, he's one of, if not the biggest dinosaurs ever found. And you get an idea by how giant this leg bone is. It's so big, I can't even fit it in the screen. So I'm going to put it back over here. And if you guys remember how big this was that I just showed you, here's a picture of the whole leg of Argentinosaurus. To give you an idea, this is a girl standing next to the entire leg of Argentinosaurus. Look at the size of that leg. Look at the size of the toes and the foot of that dinosaur. The bone I just showed you is this bone right here where my finger is. That's the femur bone. But if you look at the rest of the whole leg, it is gigantic. In fact, that girl only just gets past his ankle. That's how giant that animal was. Well, let's talk about some Colorado sauropods. Some of the ones we know that lived right here in Colorado. I showed you Brachiosaurus, right? One of the biggest. Brachiosaurus got about 80 feet long from the tail to his nose. And he weighed about 70 tons. That's about 140,000 pounds. These guys were the biggest animals to ever walk on land. And Brachiosaurus was an amazing one. One of the things that makes him unique, if you look at the way he stands, his front legs are longer than his back legs. That's what makes him so tall. His shoulders are higher, his neck is higher, and his head got way high off the ground, kind of like a giraffe. So he could reach those plants and leaves way high up that other animals just simply couldn't get to. They filled that niche. If we look at this guy, this is a Apatosaurus. Some people call it Brontosaurus, but that's a long question, a long convoluted conversation about that. But some people know him as Brontosaurus. This is a Apatosaurus. Apatosaurus lived all over Colorado. And if you want to get an idea how big both of these dinosaurs were, if I put them right here, I'm going to tilt this just a little bit. If we pretend that this wine cork with the smiley face on it, right? This represents your mom or dad. That's how big your mom or dad is, right? Maybe 6 feet tall tops, but right around there, 5.5 to 6 feet tall. Your mom or dad. If we put this next to Brachiosaurus and Apatosaurus, can you imagine your mom or dad standing next to it? Look how gigantic this dinosaur is next to a person. They were huge, huge animals. In fact, here's a really cool thing to give you an idea how big they really were. Everyone out there, make a fist with your hand. If you guys can hear me, make a fist. Everyone's making a fist. Okay, right now, as we're sitting here, your beating heart, boom, 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 boom. Your beating heart is as big as your hand. That's kind of cool, right? Your heart right now is as big as your hand. As you guys grow bigger into adulthood or teenagers, your body's going to get bigger, your heart will get a little bit bigger, and your hand will get a little bigger. But right now, your heart is as big as your fist. Do you want to see how big Brachiosaurus's heart got? Are you sure? Okay, here we go. Here is how big Brachiosaurus's heart was. Are you ready for this? Look at the size of this heart. It takes up the whole screen. In fact, I can barely get the whole thing on here. My heart is this big as my hand. Brachiosaurus's heart was that big. That's where the blood came out. Imagine that heart beating inside the chest of a giant dinosaur. One of the things I think about sometimes, which is kind of cool, imagine if you could go in a time machine, right? And go back in time and stand right here, right next to a giant Brachiosaurus. Now, he probably wouldn't hurt you because you're so small compared to him. That's like you guys going way out of your way to crush a beetle, right? You just wouldn't. It's just like it's so small, you don't really think about it. I don't think Brachiosaurus would pay any attention to us. We're simply too small. But I think if we could go back in a time machine and stand next to a Brachiosaurus and listen really closely, I think you'd hear boom, 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 boom. You'd hear that giant heart I just showed you beating inside this huge chest. Boom, 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 boom. It would sound like a huge bass drum. And here's something else really cool about Brachiosaurus and Apatosaurus, and even the giant Argentinosaurus leg I just showed you, right? These dinosaurs were so gigantic, you would think if you dropped them in the ocean that they would sink like a stone, right? Because they're so heavy. But Mother Nature, who's the smartest ever, did something really special with the sauropod dinosaurs. Here's a model or a picture of the head and the neck of a sauropod, right? That's Diplodocus right there. Diplodocus was another Colorado dinosaur. All of these spaces in here between these bones, these white spaces, a lot of these guys, believe it or not, had air sacs. So imagine a balloon. You blow up a balloon. Imagine if I had balloons stuck in and around my body, right? First of all, I wouldn't be as heavy as you would think when you first looked at me because I'd have all these air pockets in me, right? And the other thing is if I did jump in a really deep pool, I'd probably float. I'd probably be kind of buoyant and be really lightweight in the water. So as gigantic as these guys are, there's a possibility that they would float if you dropped them in water because they had huge air sacs throughout their bones, throughout their neck, and throughout their bodies that helped them So they didn't have to carry around all that immense weight all the time. So they're very unique. Mother Nature adapts to all different circumstances, all different possibilities, and you just never know what's going to happen with these guys. Diplodocus, I mentioned, was another Colorado dinosaur that looked a lot like Apatosaurus, except Diplodocus was almost 100 feet long. Apatosaurus was about 60 feet long, but Diplodocus was almost 100 feet long, and half of his whole body length was his tail. And he could use that tail like a weapon, like a bullwhip, right? And it would be really scary for other dinosaurs that might be trying to attack him. So there was ways of them to defend themselves, but mostly with sauropods, because they were so gigantic, not many animals bothered them. Not many other meat-eating dinosaurs would even bother to take on a giant sauropod. It's kind of like if you look at an elephant in Africa. There's no animal, even a lion, that's going to try and take on a full-grown, healthy elephant. They might go after a baby one. They might go after a sick or injured one, or maybe even a really old one. But these animals were so big that nothing like Allosaurus would even try to take on a full-grown healthy one. Their defense mechanisms basically were just, they were so big. They were so gigantic. And I bet some of these guys would live to be 100 years old, believe it or not. Being that gigantic, they lived for a long time, kind of like a modern tortoise. If you think about a Galapagos tortoise, right? They're the biggest tortoises on Earth, and some of them live for hundreds of years. That's pretty crazy, right? So these guys probably lived close to 100 years. And I bet if you could see a full-grown Brachiosaurus, if you get in a time machine and go back in time, he'd probably have all kinds of scars on him from animals that have tried to attack him as he was growing up from a baby. So they would have been amazing creatures that would have had to withstand pretty difficult lives, I think. What else do I want to tell you about sauropods besides the fact that they're just amazing animals? They're absolutely huge. They're the animals that think, when you hear the word dinosaur, you usually think about sauropods because they were so absolutely massive. Lily, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, about 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Well, I tell you what, I have a feeling you guys have a lot of questions. So why don't we cut to some questions right now, and let's go ahead. I know you guys got a ton of questions. Let's see how I can do with them. All right, go ahead and lay them on me, Lily.
Okay.
Walker, hey, buddy, how are you?
Would like to know, could sauropods defend themselves against Allosaurus?
Could sauropods defend themselves against Allosaurus? Well, kind of like I was just saying, if they were babies, or if they were injured or sick, or if they were really old ones, they may have a problem against Allosaurus. Allosaurus may have a chance to eat them or attack them and eat them at that point. If it was a full-grown, healthy Apatosaurus, I don't think Allosaurus could do much. Here's something I want to show you about Apatosaurus. Can anyone tell me what this is? It kind of looks like a blob, but if I hold it this way, you can kind of see this is a footprint from Apatosaurus. Look at the size of that foot. That is one single foot. And you can see the toes. Here's one here, here's one here, and there's one here. That gives you an idea how big Apatosaurus was. Just 1 foot was about 4 times bigger or 5 times bigger than an elephant's foot. So that animal was so gigantic and so heavy that it could defend itself pretty good against Allosaurus. But that's not to say that if it died from old age or disease, maybe it couldn't find water, that if Allosaurus didn't find one that was already dead, it sure would eat it, I think. I think without any doubt, Allosaurus would eat anytime there was food in front of them. So I think a full-grown Apatosaurus probably didn't have to worry about Allosaurus, if that answers your question. Great question, Walker. Next one.
Do most long-necked dinosaurs eat meat? That's from Mika.
Mika always has great questions too. Do most or all?
Do most long-necked dinosaurs
Do most long-necked dinosaurs eat plants? The answer is absolutely yes. Now, that's not to say that while they're eating plants, they might not eat 1 or 2 insects that get mixed in there, or maybe a little lizard or a frog, but they don't know it's there, so they're not thinking about that. They mainly eat branches, pine needles, leaves, things like that, grasses and ferns. They had very unique teeth. I don't have a fossilized tooth from a sauropod because they're pretty rare, so I don't have one of those. But what they look like is kind of like my finger. If I hold my finger like that, they're kind of like pegs. They're kind of rounded. They're not really that sharp. Some of them were flat like a spoon. And there was for basically grabbing a branch and scraping off all the leaves. Grabbing it and just scraping all the leaves. And then they would just kind of chew it a few times. and swallow it. We want to chew our food a lot, right? We don't want to choke on it, so we chew, 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 and then we swallow, right? These guys would kind of scrape them off the trees, chomp a couple times, and then swallow it. And the real production came when they swallowed it, because one of the unique things that sauropods had is these things that we call gastroliths. And all they were rocks. These guys would swallow rocks, and those rocks would sink down to their bodies and their stomachs. And as they had they would have a whole bunch of them in there. So as these leaves and branches and pine needles would go down there, these rocks would just roll around in their stomach and grind up these plants and help them digest all those plants. And the reason we know that they have those rocks called gastroliths is because when we find a skeleton to one of these guys in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a desert or a really rocky place, in and around their stomach area will be a whole bunch of perfectly smooth rocks. Kind of like rocks you find along a river or in an ocean. Kind of like the rocks on a pool table. They're really super smooth like glass, because we know they were inside the tummy of a giant sauropod, and they were rolling around, and that's what helped them get really smooth, and it helped the dinosaur digest all that stuff. Great question. Yes, they all ate plants. Yep, next one.
All right, Stella would like to know.
Stella.
How heavy is Brachiosaurus and how many are in Colorado?
Great question. Stella in Los Angeles. Hi, Stella wants to know how heavy was Brachiosaurus and how many have they found? That's a great question. I can tell you almost all Brachiosauruses ever found have been found here in Colorado. The first one was found over 100 years ago, right down the street outside the city of Denver, in a town called Canyon City is where the first one was found. They found a few there. And in fact, if any of you guys ever fly in airplanes that often and go through the city of Chicago, in the middle of the airport, there's a skeleton of a Brachiosaurus just standing there. It's kind of neat. But that skeleton was found in Colorado. So a lot of them were found there. And he got pretty heavy. Brachiosaurus got about 80 tons. That's about 160,000 pounds. That's about as heavy as 16 elephants. 16 big African elephants. If you could take 16 of them and squish them together into one animal, that's how heavy Brachiosaurus was. That's pretty heavy. That's heavier than 4 or 5 giant semi trucks that you see on the interstate, the big semi-tractor trailer trucks. Imagine 4 or 5 of those trucks weighing as much as one Brachiosaurus. Great question, Stella. All right, next question.
Ollie would like to know how smart is Brachiosaurus?
Ollie, terrific question. How smart was Brachiosaurus? That's kind of tough to tell. And the reason is all we can tell about brain size in the dinosaurs by the little space in their skulls where their brain was. Now, it's very likely that these big giant sauropods were probably about as smart as a cow. I'm not saying cows are dumb at all. I think there's some really smart cows out there. I think they were smart to a point. But all they really had to think about when they were living their lives was growing up, pooping, having babies, and eating food. And that's about all they really had to think about. So they didn't have to think about a lot. They didn't go to school. They didn't have to read and write and do math and things like that. They just thought about the most basic things. They were probably on average intelligent dinosaurs, unlike a raptor, a velociraptor, or the raptor families. They were super smart. They had a big section in their skull that was big compared to their whole skull size, which tells scientists that raptors had big brains and were probably the smartest dinosaurs. So I would say they were right in the middle. Terrific question. All right, next question.
Tucker wants to know.
My man Tucker.
Do you know anything about Brachiosaurus's eyes?
Do I know anything about Brachiosaurus's eyes? I can tell you that like almost all plant-eating animals, that includes horses and cows and deer and elk and all kinds of things like that, sauropods had their eyes on the side of their heads. So imagine the face of a horse or a cow. Their eyes are kind of on the side of their head. They can't really see forward like we can. Our eyes are right in front. So are the eyes of birds, a lot of lizards, things that are predators. They see straight ahead so they can see really good. Animals that are not predators, that are more herbivores, tend to have their eyes on the side of their heads so they could see different directions, but not really well looking straight ahead. So if you often look at horses, it's not too often they're looking straight at you. They kind of usually turn their head a little bit and they can see this way or this way. So most sauropods, their eyes, in fact, all sauropods, their eyes were on the side of their head So they would look out that way and couldn't really see straight ahead. And we know that, of course, because the skulls we find, the fossils. And as I tell you guys, fossils never, exactly, fossils never lie. So if we pull the skull of an Apatosaurus or Brachiosaurus or Camarasaurus or Diplodocus or Diplodocus, some people say the name's a little bit different, the skull will show us where the eyes go. And I hope that helps to answer your question, Tucker. That's a good question. All right, next one.
Walker wants to know what's the largest dinosaur bone you have.
The largest dinosaur bone I have, the largest real dinosaur bone I have is just a big hunk of bone. It was a piece that I got. It's just a chunk, and it's part of a whole one. It's kind of like if you look at this bone back here, this is the leg bone of an Apatosaurus right here. That's pretty big, right? That's the femur bone. That's this bone here between my knee and my hip. And the biggest piece I have is just like a little chunk that came from the end of probably a super big bone. I don't have a lot of real big stuff because one of the reasons is big stuff, real fossils that are big, first of all, they all belong in museums for the most part. But the second part is they're simply too heavy. They're so heavy. That bone right there is a replica. It's a copy of a real one. This is exactly what the real one looks like. This is exactly how big it was, but that's, I should have known. So that's my dog. She always barks when someone knocks on the door. But that right there is made from plastic, but it's modeled and molded after a real one. So that's exactly what the real one looks like. But the real one would weigh about 900 pounds. That's super heavy. That one weighs about 40 pounds. So I can pick that up no problem and put it back in my truck and go to schools and do shows with it. So the problem with big fossils is they're simply too heavy. That Allosaurus skull, that's a replica. If that was real, that'd probably be close to 80 or 90 pounds. It's just too big to have big, giant, real stuff. Plus, the real stuff belongs in museums for the most part. So that's why I don't have anything really gigantic. But I like that question. All right, next question.
All right. Cormac would like to know, how did a male Brachiosaurus attract females?
Cormac wants to know, how did a male Brachiosaurus attract female Brachiosauruses? I would have to say, because as of right now, we don't know if they had skin things that hung off, kind of like if you think of a chicken. Chickens have those red things on their head and red things around their cheeks called wattles. Geese have them lots of times too. Turkeys have them. We don't know if Brachiosaurus had something like that. A lot of the big sauropods could have had pieces of skin or growths on their head or on their neck that were super bright colored, like red, like a chicken's or like a goose's, super red. And then sometimes those animals use those to attract a girlfriend. That's what they do. But because the skin does not survive on a fossil, right? Because the skin is soft. My skin is soft. My eyes are mostly water. This goes away. We just find the bones. So we don't know exactly what kind of decorations they may have had. So I would be willing to guess, and this is a guess, because one of the things I like to say is I don't know everything. I try and read as much as I can, and I love learning new stuff. So Billy the paleontologist doesn't know everything, but I'd be willing to guess that there's a likelihood he might have had some decoration around his face, because his face is high up off the ground, and that's where other Brachiosauruses are going to be looking, is high up. They're not going to look at the ground. They're going to look high up for something. So there's a chance he had a lot of color around his face, and there's also a good chance he probably made loud noises. Like elephants can make super loud noises, but some of the noises they make are super low, like a rumble. And they're so low that we can't even hear them as humans. We can't even hear the noises that elephants make, but other elephants can hear it. So I bet there's a chance that not only did they have color on their face or on their necks to attract mates or girlfriends, but there's probably a good chance that they made noises that would make a girlfriend go, ooh, there's a boy Brachiosaurus over there. I can hear him. I want to go over and say hello. So those are my guesses right there, but we don't really know for sure. And that's part of the fun about science and nature, is studying and reading and putting together our own ideas about what something might have been like. Terrific question. All right, next one.
Lauren wants to know, why couldn't other dinosaurs take on Brachiosaurus?
Why couldn't other dinosaurs take on Brachiosaurus? Well, again, as I said before, a full-grown Brachiosaurus was simply too big. It was too big and too strong. If it was a baby one or one that was injured or sick or really sick, then they probably have a good chance of taking it down, right? Or if it's super old, right? When animals or people get super, super old, we get fragile, we get smaller. But a full-grown Brachiosaurus, it's simply too big and too strong. That's like you walking up to an elephant, even if you had a hammer or a sword or something like that, and trying to hurt it or trying to kill it. It's not really possible for you to do it. And all it would take is one big foot to squish you. And that's what elephants would do. Or they'd stab you with their big tusks, right? These guys would just stomp on you with their feet because they were just too gigantic. That's the answer. They're just too big and too strong.
Nevac would like to know, what if it got sick?
Nevac, what if a Brachiosaurus got sick? You know what? Dinosaurs got sick. Just like people get sick, just like other animals can get sick. Dinosaurs got diseases like cancer. They had lung infections probably now and again. They're animals. They're made of flesh and blood just like we are, just like dogs and cats are. If dogs and cats never got sick, there wouldn't be vets, right? Well, dinosaurs got sick sometimes. Sometimes we find fossils of dinosaurs, and in their bones, you can see where they had really bad infections. And infections in your bones can sometimes get into your bloodstream, and your blood goes all throughout your body, and that can make you super sick. Maybe it's an injury. Did you know one of the biggest problems an animal this big could have is simply falling down? If you weigh 160,000 pounds and you trip and fall, all of your body weight is going to fall onto whatever part hits the ground. I'm sure you guys have been running along and you accidentally trip and fall and you skin your knee or you hit your head or something like that. Well, imagine if you weighed 160,000 pounds and you tripped and fell. If these guys did it, it means they could break their ribs, they could snap their leg bones, they could hurt themselves really, really badly. And if that was the case, then maybe a predator could take them down because they got a broken leg, or they broke some ribs and they can't breathe, or they punctured their lung. So believe it or not, it's kind of a funny thing to think about to some extent, that one of their biggest problems they ever had is tripping and falling and getting hurt under their own weight. So great question. What do we got next?
Henry would like to know, how could sauropods walk when they were so heavy?
How could sauropods walk when they were so heavy? Henry, that's a terrific question. And that's one of the things that makes sauropods so unique. If you look at an elephant walking is exactly pretty much what a sauropod would look like. If I show you this Brachiosaurus, he's got giant legs, right? And they're kind of 4 legs, super gigantic. If I turn it this way, they're all directly under his body, just like an elephant. They're kind of like giant tree trunks. So he would walk very much like this. He would just walk along like this, and those giant tree trunks supporting all of this super, super heavy weight. And they would just kind of walk probably kind of like that, kind of stiff-legged, because they were so heavy that those legs would just support all that weight. That's a good question. Their legs are, think of them like tree trunks or telephone poles, super strong to support them. Perfect. Good question. Yeah. Next one.
Cormac wants to know, what's the heaviest dinosaur?
Cormac wants to know, what's the heaviest dinosaur? The heaviest dinosaur is going to be dinosaurs like Argentinosaurus. They fall into a family of sauropods. Remember, because sauropods are all long necks. But within the sauropods, there's a little exclusive club called the titanosaurs. And the titanosaurs have a certain number of dinosaurs like Argentinosaurus, Dreadnoughtus, Patagotitan, Giraffatitan. Those are all animals that were some of the biggest dinosaurs that ever lived. And those guys reached upwards of 90 to 100 tons, maybe even more. 100 tons is 200,000 pounds. So they got super gigantic. So it's the titanosaurs, that little club of those other super big ones. Those are the ones that got the biggest. Now, which one was exactly the heaviest? Well, we're not sure because we're just guessing by the size of their bones. We don't have a real dinosaur to weigh. So it's all guessing, taking the best, which we call it an educated guess, which means taking all the information we have, putting it together like a computer, and deciding a decent number that probably guesses the best as to what something was like or how heavy something was. So I would say it's one of the titanosaurs. Great question. Next one. We all good? You guys, we only have a couple seconds left here. I want to thank everyone for joining. We hope you had a great time. This was a really cool show. We had some really cool things to look at. Sauropods. You gotta love them. Absolutely massive. The biggest animals to ever walk the planet. Pretty cool. And remember, I always say, if you want to learn more, read more books. Get your parents to buy you some more books because scientists are learning new stuff all the time. So we'll see you Friday at 10 a.m. I'm open to any ideas at fossilposse.com. You can email me if you have an idea what you want to learn about. But you guys, thank you so much. Have a terrific day. And remember, stay patient with your parents. This is a weird time, but we're all going to get through this. All right, we'll see you on Friday. Bye. Take care.